course, a wife, a mom, and a stepmom. I have 4 children. I obviously own and founded Yandle Advocacy. I also, if you see me at the ABS Kids table with a different name tag, I'm also the director for ABS Kids. So I do a lot of things here in North Carolina related to supporting children with autism and their families. I previously, what's really important and how I became an advocate and started in Yandle Advocacy is I was previously a special education teacher for 14 years. Went to school, got my autism grad degree, fell in love with people with autism, wanted to support the families. Then ended up realizing in the school district that I only had power to support and encourage the students within my 4 walls, and I wanted to be able to have a bigger impact. So I went back to school, got my master's degree for school administration, and thought, okay, I'm going to climb the education corporate ladder and take over the world. That's what I thought I was going to do. I was a principal for 4 years, and all 4 of those years, I ended up in situations where the county that I was working for at the time wanted me to house their self-contained and specialized programs because of my experience and expertise. But then, whenever I said, okay, well, the IEP team decided this child needs this or that, or I need this or that, or my teacher needs this or that to support these kiddos, we ended up in a situation of the red tape that every single one of you who has a kid with autism or any disability has faced, and I started wanting to bang my head against the brick wall because it was all these people from the county level and the state level telling me no, 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 when it was illegal. And I was straight going back as the principal of these schools and saying, well, no, this is illegal, this is what the IEP team said, this is what the law states. Quickly realized that my power as principal was none, and that I was just the mouthpiece for these people who had never even been in my school building. To then have to tell parents we can't do that. And I was not okay with saying that because I knew we could do it, and I knew what my passion was to do what was best for kids. So in April of 2022, I got the blessed opportunity to jump ship and came to the other side of the table. So now I help families navigate the education system for kiddos ages 3 to 21. I actually support families all over Virginia down to Florida, but I am based in North Carolina. I live right outside of Charlotte. So North Carolina has my biggest advocacy population. But I basically now, through Yandle Advocacy, we give direct advocacy services. So we attend meetings with parents, whether that's 504, IEP, we're going to dig into all that. I also do trainings for businesses, and I also come and speak at, some of you have met me at different parent events, things like that, where I just have the passion to make sure parents even know they have rights and responsibilities.
That's right.
So, I'm also completely insane, and on top of working as a director for ABS Kids, running my own nonprofit, having 4 children, getting married last year, I also decided a year and a half ago to go back to school and get my doctorate. Please don't, I haven't quite figured it out yet. But I'm one of those people that if something tugs my heart and tells me to take an opportunity and I think it's going to make a difference for somebody else in the future, I do it. Hence why I'm getting my doctorate in special education right now. So I'm actually about to submit my dissertation proposal for those of you who are interested in this on how exclusionary discipline practices impact kids with disabilities. So exclusionary discipline is essentially anytime they are removed from their peers, whether that be like an in-school suspension, whether it's suspension, expulsion, all the things. Some of the schools are still using like exclusionary rooms, where they're like packing rooms, things like that. So that's what my research is going to be on. So one of these days I'll share it all. I've actually been challenged just 2 weeks ago by a colleague of mine to write a book on my dissertation when it's done. So to be determined on if I take that next round. I'm obviously obsessed with pretzels and chocolate. I will eat all kinds of pretzels, so that's just a fun fact about me. If you ever want to know the way my heart bring me a pretzel of some sort, and I'll be happy. Okay, so I think most of us in the room are parents, right? Are there any educators, therapists, or professionals that are supporting it? You might be both.
Both.
I was saying maybe both. I also did both. I do not have a child with autism. My sister-in-law has autism, and a bunch of my family members have autism. And I'm actually working with Dr. Jones, if any of you heard him speak earlier, and I firmly believe as an autism specialist, my husband is also on the spectrum, so we're working with a diagnosis there too. So just so we kind of know what we're going to talk about today, we are going to talk about the support levels that should be, I say that very honestly, in our school systems, whether that's public, private, and charter. I'm focusing my resources for North and South Carolina. If you live outside of those 2 states, feel free to like email me or message me later and be like, hey, give me the resources for Virginia, Florida, whatever, if you happen to have to come in. I speak nationally all over the world on some of these topics, and so I am happy to support in other states as well. You will leave here today with resources that can support your school, no matter what type of school you're in, as well as resources to support yourself as a parent. So let's start with the 3 support plans that should be in school districts. And I keep saying should be on purpose because a lot of these are hypothetical, theoretical things that are in place legally and should be in place from like North Carolina and South Carolina Department of Instruction. But the exact reality is they're not happening everywhere, they're not in practice. So we're going to talk about what they should look like. And then we'll talk later about what you should do if you don't interact with these opportunities. So the first one being MTSS. This is a multi-tiered system of support. So what that means is it's essentially a tiered system for all kids, regardless of their disability status. They have an opportunity to receive differentiated instruction at the tier 1 level, right? So you'll hear teachers say these words I'm saying, but differentiated instruction essentially is just good teaching. It's where when you see that a kid has a need, you meet it, right? And that's like a really novel idea that's not really happening in our education system. So what they put in place decades ago was this MTSS, which essentially children who are not accessing the core content independently, they need some sort of additional support, regardless of their disability status, can get intervention. So a tier 2 level intervention, a tier 3 level intervention, you may have gotten letters that have come home. We'll dig more into that. But it's essentially a support system that's built into every school for kids that are struggling accessing the content, whether that be academically, behaviorally, socially, or attendance. So a lot of times you'll see, especially once we get into like middle and high school ages, that we are only looking at academics in their MTSS framework. Schools should be looking at it in all areas that affect a child being successful in their school day. A Section 504 plan is a hot topic in the news right now, right? So Section 504 plan is a plan that was put in place from the Rehabilitation Act. So it's essentially a plan for anyone who has a medical diagnosis of some sort that needs accommodations or modifications, okay? So they don't need their instruction to look different. They just need their environment and the expectations of them to look different. And that's when a Section 504 plan would be put in place. We'll talk, obviously we're gonna dig into each of these. I'm just kind of briefly touching. Now, an IEP, which is an individualized education program or plan, people interchange those 2 key words. That's essentially the plan that's written if your child has one of the 14 disabling category conditions and meets eligibility criteria, which we'll dig into what that looks like. These 14 disabling conditions are set out by the federal government under IDEA, and so which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. If I use an acronym and you don't know what it is, we're going to talk about the fact that there's so much jargon in the medical and educational fields. It's like, but if I actually use one and you're like, what are you talking about? Please say, ask me.
I just had a question, is all the stuff from the Department of Education or anything, how is that going to impact us?
So I'm actually about to share some resources on social media, not today, about where all these programs are going. But from my research, okay, all of the programs that are here to support our children with disabilities will still be intact. They will just be under a different agency, so therefore it's going to look different. So I would say for the next 2 years, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable for all of us. They're not going to go away though. So this fear mongering that I see on social media where it's like, our kids are never going to get resources anymore, our kids are losing all the support. That's not true. They're going to still have the support. The laws are still the laws. So Rehabilitation Act is still a law. IDEA is still a law, right? There are still all these things. So there's still laws. It's just figuring out how we're going to support them under different agencies. So most of the supports that we are going to be talking about will be moving under the Department of Health and Human Services Agency. So it is going to feel weird and uncomfortable for the next 2 years in the education world, in my opinion. That's like my timeline where I envision it being uncomfortable because we have to now figure out how do we still meet the laws and regulations and still meet our kids' needs under a different agency with different funding and different operational rules. So that's kind of my stance on it, but I'm going to share more resources. And actually, the Things You Ought to Know podcast, we're looking to do a whole podcast just on the political discussions around what's happening with the Department of Education. So,
What do you mean by that? Is that just changing?
just change.
Okay.
Just by uncomfortable, I mean change, which none of us do well, right? So the funding's going to be different. How personnel are going to be used is going to be different. How the funding gets down to the school level is going to look different. Therefore, the resources at the school level are going to look different for a few years. But it's gonna come back around because we have to have these things in place. It's just it's really that department from the federal stance for IEPs figuring out how we get it all the way down to a school level. In my opinion, completely Tiffany's opinion, what we're doing right now isn't working. So like a lot of parents are really frustrated about the department, but I'm like, what we're doing right now isn't working. And I'm a 20-year educator. So we have to do something different, right? But change feels uncomfortable. And changing an entity that's as large as education, which is a whole entity in our country, it's gonna take time, it's gonna be uncomfortable, and it's gonna feel weird. Ideally, we get to a better solution than what we're at right now. Because right now it's not working for anybody. I don't know if any of you guys have kids in school. I have 2 neurotypical, 2 neurodiverse, and it's not working for any of them. So that's just kind of where we're at. So MTSS, in the PowerPoint, which if you came in late, I'll put the QR code back up at the end. Anything that's underlined is a hyperlink, okay? So I try to give you guys the resource because I'm very passionate on making sure that you all have the things at your fingertips you need to answer your own questions, right? So that is a hyperlink to MTSS resources from the state. This is my favorite graphic. So many people have seen this triangle for MTSS, and it'll say like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And they'll label your kid a tier 3 kid, right? Which I cannot stand because it's a child that's receiving a tier 3 level of support. But why I like this image specifically is it encompasses that it should include all areas of the child's life, not just academics. And it also shows that this is an ever-evolving system. So the MTSS system, all of your children, regardless of their level of need, live in this system and should receive supports. So since all of us in this room have a child with autism or have some sort of neurodivergent disability, I will tell you that if your child is receiving hypothetical math under their IEP, but they don't get reading because they're really intellectually gifted, right? They may still need MTSS supports. So your child can live in multiple of these areas at the same time, depending on which section of their life they need support, right? So I say that because so many times I hear parents who have a child with an IEP say, oh, well, they're not getting interventions in writing, right? And I'm like, well, it's not on their IEP, they're not getting interventions, but their data shows that it's a deficit area. So somewhere we've got lost here because they should be getting, at the bare minimum, interventions if there's a deficit in any of these areas, okay? Bare minimum interventions. Interventions can be small group, interventions can be one-on-one. The biggest piece is that they need to be research-based. So if you have a teacher tell you that your child's getting the intervention of reteaching, that is not a research-based intervention, that is just a best practice teaching. So that doesn't count, you should push that, okay? I'm a very raw and honest person. If you guys talk to me in real life, I talk to you just like I am right now. If your teacher ever says, well, that's just best practice, or or we do that anyways, or, oh, I'm reteaching your child twice a week, so that's an intervention. No, it's not. It's not a research-based intervention. And I have a bank of research-based interventions that I'll share with you towards the end that you can share with your educators to support your child. Okay, so again, MTSS, those tier 3s, tier levels. Tier 2 level kids are the bottom 20% in any area. So again, that's social emotional, behavior, academics. Tier 3 are the bottom 5% in any area, okay? Each of these MTSS cycles, because I've also had parents that will say, oh, well, they told me that they have to have interventions for so many months. You might have heard that, right? A, that's not true. You can request evaluations at any time. B, there is a 6-week cycle. So typically kids live in these 2 tiers for 6 weeks before we look at their data and determine if they need to stay, move down, or move up. So it is a 6-week cycle for each intervention. It should be a 6-week cycle. You guys should be notified as parents. If your child's receiving interventions, you should also be invited to these meetings to look at the data, right? You're an expert on your child, so you should be in those meetings looking at the data to determine what the child needs next. Yes, ma'am.
So I just want to say, you keep saying should, but I just want to throw it out there. So parents, you are your child's best advocate. You know your child best. So we look at the schools and we look at everyone that's a professional as the professionals, but you know your child best, and she's telling us, you get knowledge, you get the information, you advocate for your child. You can speak for your child at the school level, comparable to the professionals.
And we're going to talk about that. I took half of my speech for later. We're going to talk about school too. So we're done for the day on this. So, yes, you are the expert of your child, right? So all of us, like I have 85 letters before and after my name. I'm not the expert of your child. right? So don't let me make the decisions for your child, just because I have letters reported after my name. You guys are the expert in your child. Okay, so let's talk about MTSS one more time. And I'm honing on this because this is a lost piece. And then we're going to talk about 504s and IEPs, which are really important for a lot of our kids with autism. But the number one thing that should be happening from a state level is family engagement. Again, that's where I talk about you guys should be involved in this process. You should not just be getting notification letters to say, hey, this is what we're planning to do as the intervention for your child. You should know why. You should know what the data says. You should have all that kind of information. Again, intervention should always be research-based. If you're not research-based, it's not an intervention, it's not going to work. There's no point in us looking at the data. Progress monitoring. This is another piece, and this is progress monitoring is related to interventions and IEPs. So I'm going to talk about this for just a little second because we should be progress monitoring by looking at data. We should be doing that every 6 weeks. As an IEP, if your child has an IEP, when they get report cards every 9 weeks, you should be getting an IEP progress note. On that IEP progress note, it should not say your child is progressing. Or it should not say, keep reading over the summer. Right? That's what we write on all our. No, that IEP progress note and your progress monitoring from intervention should be raw data. It should be your child is able to read the word cat with 80% accuracy, or whatever your IEP goal is, right? It should be actual data so that you can look at the goal that you guys set in the meeting to decide at the end of the year that they're going to reach, right? And you should be able to say, oh, okay, my child's on track for that. Or, oh man, my child's not on track for that. Maybe we are way off. Maybe we need to have an IEP. So progress monitoring is so important, and the progress monitoring should match whatever the area is that we're supporting them in. So many times I'll have people reporting like comprehension progress monitoring, like how many times your kids can answer questions when we're working on fluency. Well, those are two different skills. So the monitoring has to match the skill that we're actually trying to intervene on, whether that's through an IEP goal or an intervention. So that's just really important for you guys to have that knowledge as parents so that you can say, when you sit in an IEP meeting, what is your specially designed instruction going to look like? Okay, they should be able to answer that. How are you going to monitor my child's progress towards these goals? And they should be able to answer that. And they should match. They should look the same skill, right? Again, frequent progress monitoring every 6 to 8 weeks. I've said that quite a few times. All right, let's dig in section 504. Again, this is a resource. It's hyperlinked. So section 504 plans. These are, again, under the Rehabilitation Act. Any child who has a medical disability in the state of North Carolina is eligible for a section 504 plan. Okay? Any child that has a medical disability. That includes short term. And I want to mention that because if your child gets a concussion and they're going to need interventions for 6 months because they got a concussion, they can have, they're going to need accommodations, I'm sorry. Moving on, my words are doing along with me. Then they can get a 504 plan to get those accommodations while they have their concussion. Okay? Or if they have a chronic, long-term, forever disability, and they just need accommodations. So a lot of times, our ASD level 1 kiddos will just need a 504 plan. That's appropriate for them. They don't need their instruction to look different. They just need their environment to be different and the expectations on themselves to be different. They can be supported through a section 504 plan, okay? So if you've got that medical diagnosis and your child needs accommodations, this may be a great way to kind of research through that. This is usually in the state of North Carolina housed under our counseling programs. So usually if you want a section 504 plan and that's something you're requesting, you would email your school counselor. They're going to be the ones that are going to manage these programs for you. They're going to manage these accommodations. The biggest thing I'll tell you about section 504 plans, they're written annually. You can meet more frequently, and a lot of times they'll say, oh, well, our meeting for that's not till May. Well, no, you realize that your child needs different accommodations or what you're doing isn't working. You can meet as frequently as you want to. There is a team at these meetings. That team should be your school administrator of some sort, assistant principal, whoever. And it should be you as the professional, as your parent, as the expert of your child. And it should be classroom teacher and any other professional that's working with your kid. So I say that because if you want to bring other people or your kid is getting a small group with Miss Susie, whatever, anybody else can come to that meeting because what we're doing here is saying, okay, these are the things that we need to change in our environment to help support Susan. These are the things that we need to change our expectations of Susan, right? So we're writing those accommodations and those modifications for them. So this plan is very impactful for a lot of our ASD level 1 kids that just need, a little bit of extra support in the classroom, but don't actually need their instruction to look different. Now, this is the meat. Individual education plans, okay? So IEPs, let's start all the way back. If your child is 3 years old or older and you have not requested an IEP, I want you to do that Monday, okay? And I literally want you to send an email to your neighborhood school, whatever school it is. If your child has autism, we need to at least consider an IEP, okay? Point blank period. At least consider. Not saying they have to have one, needs to be considered. That needs to happen at age 3. They don't legally have to start school till age 7, but that way, heaven forbid, Hurricane Helene comes back, and we all get wiped out, we all have to go back to work. Your child has the capability and they're set for success to go to school, whether that be preschool, TK, whatever it is, okay? That also allows you some funding opportunities should you decide that you don't want your kid to go to public school and you want to look at a charter school or a private school, things like that. Having that IEP in place opens doors for you as a parent. So as soon as your child is 3 years old, you need to go ahead and request an IEP. Email the school principal or the school, whatever school you're zoned to go to elementary school to, and request an IEP. Say, I would like my child evaluated for special education. I would like an IEP. Have you worded? They know what you're talking about. That's going to start our 90-day timeline, the day you put that in writing. Okay? Now, I don't care if your child is 3 or 13. If they do not have an IEP, they at least need to be considered for it. Because what the school's then going to do is, first and foremost, because you wrote that request, they're going to get together with you and have a meeting to look at data. Okay? So this is the meeting where all of us together come together as a team. This is your LEA, which is your local education agency rep. So that's usually your school principal, but sometimes it will be like someone from district office, the autism specialist, different people depending on your school district. You're going to have a general education teacher. That's going to be a teacher at the same grade level that your child's going to be in or is in. You're going to have a special education teacher. You're going to have what's called an interpreter of the results. Sometimes that is your special education teacher, bless you. Sometimes that is like psychologists, occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, whoever. It's whoever's interpreting the results you're looking at. At this first meeting, you're just looking at all of the data up to that day. So that can include data the school has on your child if they're already enrolled. That can also include data that you guys have. So I say that because it's so important that if you're willing, you're not required to, if you're willing to share data with the school, like you've already had evaluations done, you've already had OT eval, you've already had a speech eval, any of those evals you've already had done, if you share them with the school and they're still within like reasonable amount of time, usually a year, then your child doesn't have to go through those evaluations again through the school system. So a lot of parents will say, should I share this information? The school's asking, they'll ask me, the school's asking for these evals, do I share them? I always say, if you're willing, and you feel comfortable sharing them, then I would share them. Because what that happens is, if we get together at this meeting, we look at the data, and we say, yes, we see there's deficits, we want to evaluate, I'll see you in 1 second. We want to evaluate. There is criteria under each of the 14 disabling categories that the school has to have in order to even consider eligibility. Each of those are different. So if you ever need to know, you can email me, hey, what's the criteria? I'll send it to you. But you can also find it on NCDPI and all the other websites. But that information, if you guys already have a speech eval within the last year, and you take it to the school no longer has to perform one, they can use the one you already have. Okay? If the school's denying using those, which happens sometimes too, you can absolutely push on that, okay? The school, as long as it's within the last year that assessment's been done, and it was done by a licensed medical professional, right? That's the big difference. It's gotta be done by a medical professional. Then you can share that and the school can use those evaluations, okay? So what was your question? Okay. Yes?
My son does have an IEP. It was last done last May.
Yep.
But he is in a private sector now for school. Is it possible to update an IEP like in the summer just through the district?
You can request an IEP meeting through your whatever school you're zoned for.
Yeah.
So you can, whatever school you're zoned for, based on your address, request an IEP meeting. They're supposed to be updated annually, but they're not gonna call you since you're at a private school and schedule that. They would if you would be enrolled in there, but you can, and you can invite your teachers from your private school to come to that meeting, is what I would do. So I would request that meeting via email with your local school, and then ask your professionals that are working with your child, because now they're experts in your child, right? Because they're spending all day with them. Because the team at the public school that you're going to have the meeting at, they don't know your kid, right? So I would invite the professionals from your private school to come with you to that meeting.
Okay, because when I had mentioned the transfer from the public school to the private school, they said, oh, well, your IEP will be negated, we'll take it off the.
No, it's still active. It's still active, and you're gonna wanna keep it active so that if you ever try to apply for ESA or opportunity grants, you have an active IEP. So you're as a parent, because you chose to go private school, you're gonna have to stay active every year with making sure you ask for that meeting and keep your IEP active.
So I would need to do that again by May, if we had done the last one in May of last year.
Yeah.
Okay,
They're good for 1 year minus a day.
okay.
Now, if you don't, your IEP does not go away. Your child is still eligible for 3 years. Okay, so eligibility remains for 3 years. Their IEP will just lapse, so you'll just have to write a brand new IEP if you meet later than the May date.
Okay.
Can you say that eligibility remains for 3 years from what date?
From the day you determined eligibility, which we're about to talk about, determining eligibility.
What is that?
So, no, for the actual IEP, for the actual IEP, not for ESA's annual, ESA is due.
So, 2 questions.
Yeah.
If the, whatever you just said, the 3-year thing, you don't have to update the IEP every year then, right? Just every 3
You don't
years?
actually have to. I would recommend it because if you are going to apply for funding of any sort, it does have to be active
So,
for funding. So
okay.
it doesn't have to be active for eligibility for special education,
Okay.
but it does have to be updated and active for if you try to get a via funding.
The opportunity grant, is that the 9,000 per year where the window just closed?
The window is closed March 6th.
Yeah.
Opportunity and ESA are open from January to March 6th every year.
And is ESA different than opportunity?
Yes, they're 2 different grants.
And you have to have a diagnosis or an IEP
I
qualified?
have to have an IEP for either.
Okay, thank you.
Is that the North Carolina?
Those are both in North
Okay,
Carolina.
what is the South Carolina?
South Carolina doesn't have funding through the state. Yeah, okay, let's talk about at these meetings. So this first meeting we just had, we got together and we looked at all the data and we decided, yes, we're gonna do the testing or no, we're not, right? So we're gonna do one of the two. Let's talk about who can come to these meetings. If the school system is inviting someone to come to these meetings, they have to inform you on your invitation. So that invitation that you get 7 to 10 days before the meeting, they have to tell you who's gonna be there. And I say that because so many parents will say, I walked into the room and there was 10 people from the school district there. I don't even know, don't even know my child. I didn't know all these extra people were gonna be there. You can literally say, I'm sorry, I don't come for a meeting today because I was not informed that all of these professionals were gonna be in the room. On the other side of the coin, you can bring whoever you want and you don't have to inform the school, okay? That is your right as a parent. So if you wanna bring an advocate, bring an advocate. If you wanna bring, your babysitter, because they're also an expert in your child, bring your babysitter. If you wanna bring your outside UCBA, bring them. If you want to bring grandma, because grandma helps care, whoever, and I recommend to every parent, even myself, and that's what I do for a living, to bring somebody with them. Because as soon, we can get sciencey, but as soon as your brain starts talking about your own child, your emotions take over. Your amygdala starts firing if you're into brain science. Your executive functioning shuts down, okay? Because you are talking about your child. You're in parent mode, you're in protective mode, and so your rational thoughts are not there, okay? So I tell everybody, bring somebody with you, so that they can be the voice, so that whenever you're in the, because it happens to everybody. When you're in the point where your back is against the wall because the school's telling you what they're gonna do for your child, or what your child can and can't do, and you're like, whoa, 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 and you're overwhelmed, you need someone else there to be your voice when you're back against the wall, okay? So take somebody with you. I do not care who it is. If you do not have an advocate, get one. If you, for whatever reason, don't want an advocate, which is fine too, bring grandma, bring a babysitter, bring your best friend. I don't care who you bring. Bring somebody, okay? Do not go in alone. I don't go in alone, okay? Even to my own kids' meetings. So anyways, that's about who you can bring, who you can't bring. So, okay, now, we've said we're gonna do the testing. We look at the federal guideline for autism, for example, and we go check mark all the things that we're gonna test. And this is where the school will usually have them pre-checked, and then if you provide some of them, they'll uncheck them. But there is things that the school has to collect in order for us to even determine eligibility, okay? So just know that even if you have medical diagnoses, there is still things the school has to collect that's set out by IDEA, which is out of any school district standards, okay? That they have to collect. For each of those 14 disabled categories, it looks different. Okay, and so they do all that evaluation, and then within 90 days of my original request, okay, so this is a lot to do in 90 days. So I requested my meeting, we had the first meeting, determined whether or not we were going to test. The county does all the evaluations that they have to collect. Within that 90 days, we are meeting again the second time to look at the results of that and determine eligibility. Okay, so this is, 90 days sounds like a long time, but to do all this is really not. And so we have a meeting again, we look at all the evaluations, we determine whether or not the child is eligible under said category or multiple categories or whatever we're looking at. It's different for every kid, right? Whenever you're looking at those evaluations, one thing I would recommend is that you look at them ahead of time. So I always tell my clients, ask the school system for the evaluations ahead of time. A, it's gonna save you from sitting in a 6-hour IEP meeting. B, it gives you time to rationalize and think through what is this evaluation saying about my child, okay? So that when you get to the meeting, you can make an informed decision, right? Because you have your experiences of what happened at home, the teacher has their experiences of what happened in the classroom, and then we have this psychological evaluation or social emotional evaluation or sensory processing evaluation. We have all these evaluations. What are they raw data saying about my child, right? So you should have all of those pieces and you should have time to review them ahead of time. So if that doesn't happen, if they do not send you the evaluations ahead of time, for whatever reason, you need to request that. If they do not send them to you, I would not send an eligibility meeting. Because otherwise you're going to sit there going through each of these evaluations and you're only going to hear the highlights from the professionals and you're going to miss the nitty gritty because they're going to write the narrative they want to write in their summary to you versus actually you looking at it and interpreting what this official report says. If you don't know how to read those official reports, get an advocate. They can tell you what it says, okay, what it means for your kid. Yes.
How often should those evaluations be happening? Is that
So it's every 3 years. So every 3 years we redetermine eligibility. But where I will caution you, if you have a child that's like a level 3 autism and they don't make a ton of progress and a ton of change in 3 years, you have to get back together as a team and determine whether you want evaluations again, but you don't actually have to conduct the evaluations. So if the team gets together every 3 years and determines like, yeah, we all basically still have a good idea of what Johnny's needs are, what services he needs to his IEP, then you don't have to do evaluations again. But if it's been like since pre-K and your kid's now in middle school and hasn't had an evaluation again, I would get one. Like, you don't necessarily have to do them every 3 years, but I would get an evaluation it really depends on your child's growth, right, their progress and what they're looking at. Another thing, just so you know, is at the 3-year reevaluation process, you don't have to collect all the same components that you did for initial eligibility. So initial eligibility, you have this long list of things. At reevaluation, you can just collect the pieces of data or the pieces of evaluations where you need more data. So maybe your child's made a ton of growth in speech, we just need a speech eval. We don't have to do all the other stuff, okay? So just know that, 3-year reevaluation decision, it doesn't have to be everything. Your IEP plan, yeah.
I was just gonna ask, so like if you go to the school, like we've had evaluations done in the past year, but like let's say we didn't, and the school says, well, we need this, that, and the other. Is it, whose responsibility is it to pay? Ours?
The schools.
The schools, okay.
100%. Any evaluation the IEP team request, school pays.
Yeah, and then the opportunity grant, if we choose to homeschool our child, are we still eligible to apply for that? Okay, and then if we do get the IEP, just because we want to do the opportunity grant, but let's say he's in a private school, we don't necessarily need that implemented, like, do we have to implement the IEP at the private school just to?
No, you just kind of have an active one.
Okay.
A lot of private schools won't, I wouldn't say a lot, some private schools won't even look at an IEP because private schools are not legally bound to utilize an IEP. Charter schools and public schools are, private schools are not. But we do have a good number in our area, in the Charlotte area, of private schools that will honor IEPs. So we are a little less than this area. Now, if you go outside of Charlotte, there's not many. But there are some in Charlotte, probably, bigger cities. So your IEP, actual IEP plan, I'll see your hand 1 second, is every year. So you meet every year to update that IEP. And what I want to tell you about this is, A, if you get one of those progress notes and your child is not making adequate progress, like where they're regressing or anything like that, call an IEP. Because you can call an IEP meeting 18 times a year if you so choose, okay? It does not matter. If you want an IEP meeting, call one. You have that right, so does the school. So if the school sees your child has huge progress or huge regression, and these goals are no longer appropriate, or these accommodations are no longer appropriate, IEP meeting, okay? Because that's where all the decisions and all the change has to happen, is on the IEP meeting. Do not let the school say, well, we're just gonna start working on this goal because your child already met this goal, so we're just gonna start working on something else. Your special education teacher is a wonderful person and they have the best interest of heart for kids. I firmly believe that. You need to have an IEP meeting put in writing, because otherwise your child is not protected. Okay, so unless it is in that 30-something page document, your child is not protected, and it does not exist. I do not care if it is in a parent square message. I do not care if it is in an email. I do not care if you talk to the teacher about it in the car right pick up on it. If it is not an IEP meeting, there is no, in the IEP itself, there is no accountability to the school district to do that. Okay, and so many times, I'm guilty of too, you trust our educators, because I firmly believe educators do what's best for kids. But if the educator does that, and either they leave, or their supervisor says no, or what have you, then your child has no protections. Okay, question right here.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about the opportunity grants.
Okay, opportunity ESA grants are through the state of North Carolina. Those are grants that provide funding for optional school opportunities, like if you don't want your child in a public school.
And is there anything equivalent to that in South Carolina?
Nope, not right now. All South Carolina has really is some supports, obviously children 3 through MegaNet, and like grant opportunities through private foundations.
There is something called exceptional SC, which is sort of private school, and I think it's to the state, or maybe, it's called exceptional SC, and it's the same idea. You can get money with private.
I've never heard of that, so that's exciting. I'm gonna
I
start
was
researching.
wondering about that, because that's like 11,000 a year, so it's like.
Up to, what you get there is what it is.
How do I figure out my rights for my 4-year-old in my private school? Because I just feel like he's being discriminated against, so I just want to come to the point.
So really within private schools, your only way that you can file a complaint is through the Office of Civil Rights and doing a OCR complaint, because private schools do not have to fall under IDEA. So that's going to be, but I would work directly with your director at your private school to figure out what accommodations they can put in place for your child, things like that. And not all private schools are best fit for our kids with autism, I'll just be honest.
She doesn't want to do anything.
Yeah, so if you're at a private school where they're basically saying like, no, we won't meet your child's needs, they legally don't necessarily have to. You can file an OCR complaint for discrimination, but if it's discrimination just in the sense that they're not willing to provide the accommodations your child needs or the therapies or services, they're not legally bound to have to do the private school. Yeah, it's a little wild. So private schools are good for some families, they work great for some families. I encourage private schools for some families, and then other families it's not great. So it just kind of depends on your kids' needs.
The IEP guarantee price if you're in the public schools.
Yeah.
Public or charter.
Charter, if you're out of it, or then it's not.
Correct.
Is there a specific time frame from when a parent requests an IEP that's like outside of the April one? How much time do they need, I guess, are allotted before they can actually schedule it? Because I've had parents, I'm a mom and a professional, so I'll tell parents they can request the IEP meeting at any time. But then I've had teachers in school that will take forever until it's that annual time, and they're like, oh yeah, well, now we don't need to schedule it because it's coming up. So what is there a guideline for that?
So there's not a written guideline, it says a reasonable amount of time in the law. So, but what I will tell you is, what I tell my clients to request is a specific date. So I want to have a meeting by spring break,
Okay.
and I go ahead so that you kind of put the ball back in their court and tell my clients to put specific dates in their email. I am available on these dates, and these dates.
Okay. Yeah.
So then you're putting them back to where, if you're giving them April dates, it's gonna be really hard for them to come back and say, oh, we're gonna meet in June, right?
Exactly.
But, yeah, okay, I have 5 minutes, so I was really quickly show you the resources, because I wanted to go through these, but you just are gonna have access and do it yourself. But you can reach out to me anytime, and I'll help you answer questions. Okay, South Carolina procedural safeguards. This is the handbook of parents' rights that they give you at every meeting, or they're supposed to offer you at every meeting, and some people take them and like wallpaper their walls with them to get them, classes here. What I like to do is highlight the important things, right? So this, in my opinion, are the most important pages in this big old document. Same thing for North Carolina. So you have this, these are linked to those exact documents, and these are the pages that if I told a parent that, hey, you don't want to read all 80 pages, these are the ones I would read. Okay, these are the most important in my opinion. Resources really quickly. Here are resources for families. So this list of helpful terms stays updated. It's a live Google Doc. This is my list. So like I said in the education and medical jargon, it's awful. So this is what I call TIffany terms. So if someone asks me, what does such and such mean? I answer it in TIffany terms as if we were having coffee. And then I put it on this document. So it's a live document that stays up to date as I get people to ask me questions. So that's a huge one. I always tell everyone to look at their local school board policies. They're a fantastic resource. These two are other documents that I created. This back to school email, I would encourage parents, anytime you're getting a new team of professionals, so it's usually each school year, but sometimes it's in the middle of the school year. This is an email that I have a template that helps you write to the teachers really explicitly on who your child is. So that before, because ideally they're supposed to have the IEP before day one, ideally they're supposed to read it, okay? Reality, okay? Let's talk about reality. So reality is if you send them an email that's one paragraph that just outlines your child really quickly, that you are more likely that somebody's going to have read that than they have your 80-page document of IEP, right? So it's at least something. So there's a resource for you. Another resource is this IEP parent organizer that I made. And so that resource as well just helps you organize that IEP. So it just pulls out just the goals, just like the meat of it, right? That you need to be tracking as a parent, be aware of as a parent. If your kid is older, this is a document all in transition services here in North Carolina. The U.S. Department of Special Education website, right? This is still the website right now. This will change whenever that changes. North Carolina NCDPI. So these are our North Carolina policies. And then an MTSS guide for families. So if you have kiddos that are in the intervention world or should be in the intervention world. And then also South Carolina Department of Education. Similar resources for professionals, but here's something you guys can share. This bank of interventions are all research-based interventions. So if your kiddo's living in the world of intervention still and isn't getting session design instruction, that's a huge resource. Family engagement checklist, those are all more for professionals that I've created. Questions? We've been answering, I want to hear really quick because he keeps giving me the warnings and I don't want to know. I stand between lunch, so I'm like, yes.
Real fast, that MTSS, the 504, and if your child in private school, the only thing you really need is IEP.
Yeah.
It's just for the grants, and that's it.
Just for the grants. If you're in a private school that doesn't work off of an IEP. Some private schools in our area do.
Just for the money, that's it, okay.
Yeah.
Then, so I don't understand the other, but
The only thing that I will tell you is if you're in a private school, just know anything can happen at any point. So if your private school shuts down and you want your kid protected, heaven forbid you need to put them back in their main group. So I will keep it updated. Just to protect you and your child. Like literally. Yes. Right here. There's my presentation again. You didn't get it. And all the links are in there. And so this morning, I'm standing at the ABS Kids table because I live in too many worlds, I told you earlier. And then this afternoon, Christine Golden, it has to leave, so we are gonna share an advocacy table. So Inwood Advocacy will be represented this afternoon in the resource room. So feel free to stop by and ask me questions, see me at either of those tables. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, sorry, that was so fast.